She sets the manuscript down. Her hands leave the pages with the particular care of someone returning something that belonged to them before they knew it did. And the desk lamp catches the red pen lying exactly where she placed it 20 minutes ago. Beside the stack, not on it, and not a single mark. My hands are in my lap. I am aware of their temperature. She looks up. The look is not the workshop look. I know the workshop look exactly. I have been its subject for 8 months and have learned to receive it the way you learn to receive cold water, by going still and letting it happen. This is different. This is a register I have not seen from this particular woman, and something in my sternum registers it before I have categorized it, before I have named it, before I have done anything at all with it. She says, "You knew what you were putting in this room when you wrote that last chapter. The lamp between us, the city 3 floors down." So did I. If you want to hear uncensored too hot for YouTube stories, check out my Patreon in the description. Tell us where you're watching from and subscribe. 8 months ago, at the beginning of all of this, I sat in the first session of Riven's advanced doctoral workshop and told myself a story about why I was there. The story was rigor. The story was her scholarship on documentary rhythm and its translation to long-form prose, which I had read twice during my years in nonfiction film and which had reorganized several things I thought I understood about narration. The story was, this program, this workshop, this specific critical environment is the thing my novel requires, and I am here for the novel. The story was clean and professional and had the advantage of being substantially true, which is the best kind of cover for the parts of a story that are not entirely true. The part that was not entirely true was this. I had read everything Riven had published, not only the scholarship. The 2 novels, the essays in journals I had to find through interlibrary loan, the one interview she gave in 2019 to a small literary magazine, in which she said, with the particular bluntness that I would later learn was simply how she spoke, that she had no patience for writers who stood at the edge of the true thing and wrote around it for reasons of comfort or fear or aesthetic fashion, and that the only interesting thing a writer could do was go directly into the difficulty and stay there until they had something that mattered. I had read that interview in a coffee shop during my 3rd year of documentary work and felt something shift in my chest. Not inspiration, something more precise than inspiration, something with more specific weight. And I had not examined it closely enough at the time to know what it was. I was 33 when I entered the doctoral program. I had spent 8 years in narrative documentary, cutting other people's stories into shapes that held, learning what footage told the truth and what footage performed truth, and how the space between those 2 things was where the interesting work happened. I came to the program with a novel that had been with me for 4 years, a novel about 2 women in adjacent apartments during a year of private catastrophe, a novel I knew was close to something true and could not get past the knowing it was close into the thing itself. I came because I believed a workshop with real pressure would break something open. I came because of the rigor. I came because of Riven. I would not have said this out loud to anyone in my cohort. I barely said it to myself. It sat in me as a quiet fact I had decided not to examine, the way you decide not to examine the structural integrity of a thing you are standing on and need to keep standing on. The first workshop session was a Thursday in September. I had submitted 15 pages the week before. The opening of the novel's 2nd section, the apartment scene, the 2 women at a kitchen table in the early evening with the specific quality of unfinished business that had been building for 60 pages. I had submitted them because Riven's workshop required a submission, not because I thought they were ready, and I had sat in the workshop's seminar room at the long table with 11 other doctoral candidates and waited for the session to begin with the particular quality of stillness that I had developed over years of sitting in editing rooms, waiting for the cut to reveal itself. Riven came in at 9:03. The seminar room changed when she entered it. This is the only honest way I can describe it, because the alternatives are all softer and less accurate. The room changed. The specific quality of the air shifted. Conversations that had been underway finished themselves and did not restart. The cohort's collective attention relocated without being asked to. She was wearing a dark blazer and a silk blouse in a deep charcoal gray, open at the collar, and she moved through the room with the unhurried precision of someone who had never once doubted where she was going or why. She set her materials on the table and looked around the room at 11 faces with the clear, level attention of someone taking inventory. Not unkindly, not warmly, simply with accuracy. And something in my sternum went quiet and alert at the same moment, the way it does when you recognize something before you have a name for it. She looked at me for slightly longer than the others. I told myself this was because I was a mature entry and therefore slightly unusual, and therefore worth a second moment of inventory assessment. I told myself this and believed approximately 60% of it. She said, "There's a true thing in here. You're still writing around it." She said it to the room about my pages at 9:04 a.m. on the first Thursday of the semester, and the room received it as a workshop note, which it was, and I received it in some additional register that I declined to name, which it also was. She was correct. There was a true thing in the 15 pages, and I was writing around it. I had known this when I submitted them. I had been hoping she wouldn't see it in the first session, which was naive in the specific way that hoping Riven won't see the thing in your pages is naive, which is to say, completely. I spent the following 8 months finding it. Workshop met every other Thursday. Between sessions, I wrote and revised and submitted new pages, and Riven read them and returned them with red pen marks. Specific, precise, occasionally devastating, always correct. This is the thing about her notes. They had the particular quality of notes written by someone who had been reading long enough to know not only what was wrong, but what the wrong thing was hiding, what it was a symptom of, what the writer was not yet willing to say. The red pen moved across my pages in the specific handwriting of a woman who had no patience for the distance between the writer and the true material, and who communicated this consistently and who was correct every time. I filed this under, "She is correct about the work." I did not examine what it produced in my chest when I collected my returned pages from the workshop folder and found 6 pages of red pen notes in her handwriting. I did not examine the specific quality of attention with which I read each one. I did not examine why, in the months that followed, I sometimes found myself in the library at 10 p.m., reading back through her published work. Not as a student doing research, but with the kind of attention you give to something you're trying to understand in a new way, and finding things in it that I had not found in the first 2 readings, things that seemed now like a private frequency I had learned to tune to. I told myself, she is the most rigorous reader my work has ever had. I told myself, this is what serious critical attention feels like, and I am not accustomed to it. I told myself a number of things, all of which were true, none of which were complete. The red pen was her instrument. I understood this by November. In workshop, she used it to annotate the pages under discussion on her own copy. When she returned our work, she used it for marginal notes. She held it during discussion, in her right hand, rolling it slowly between 2 fingers in the specific, repetitive motion of someone whose hands need something to do when their mind is occupied. By December, I had a precise and detailed awareness of what the red pen meant as a signal system. An annotation meant the line needed work. A marginal note in her hand meant she had something to say about the larger structure. The pen held, and rolling meant she was thinking, and the thinking was not finished. In February, she returned 12 pages of mine with the most extensive set of notes I had received. 8 pages of red pen marginalia and 2 additional sheets in her handwriting with structural observations about the apartment scenes, the geometry of the 2 women's proximity, the way I was using the kitchen as an emotional landscape, the way the unspoken thing between them was functioning in the spatial description. The notes were precise and demanding, and this is the part I turned over and looked at from several angles before I put it down. They were, in the specific quality of their attention, the closest thing to being read by someone who understood exactly what I was trying to do that I had experienced in 4 years of working on this novel. I collected the pages from the workshop folder and sat in the library with them for 2 hours. I told myself I was working. I was reading her handwriting and feeling something move in my chest that had the specific quality of recognition. Not of what I had written, but of something else, something I was not ready to name. By March, I was writing toward it. I didn't know this yet. I know it now. The final chapter came in April, in the last month of the semester. It came the way things come when you have finally stopped standing at the edge. All at once, in a 4-day period, 34 pages that I wrote without revision, and read back once and knew were the thing itself. The 2 women in the apartment, the kitchen, the particular afternoon when one of them says the true thing and the other one doesn't answer with words. 34 pages of the thing I had been writing around for 4 years, and I wrote them in 4 days in April and sat with them for a week before I understood what I had done. I had put myself in them. This is the only accurate description. Not my circumstances, not my biography, not my opinions. Myself, the thing I carry that is most central and most protected, the thing I had been standing at the edge of for 4 years and 1 semester, and I had finally gone into it and written it down and handed 34 pages of it across a desk to Riven at 7:55 p.m. on a Friday. At 7:56 p.m., she had said, "Sit down," and then she had read it. She reads the way she does everything, with the specific quality of attention that has no room in it for anything except the object of attention. I had watched her read in workshop when we were discussing another student's pages. She went away somewhere into the pages and came back with something she had found there. Now she was going away into my pages, and I sat in the chair across the desk and looked at the desk lamp's small circle of gold on the manuscript and tried to do something useful with my hands, which were in my lap and warm. She held the red pen the entire time. I tracked this without meaning to. She picked it up before she turned the first page and held it in her right hand the way she always did, the way that meant she was reading and thinking, and I watched her not use it across all 34 pages with the specific quality of attention you give to something you understand is significant before you have the full translation. In workshop, Riven's red pen touched the page within the first 2 minutes. Always, for every submission from every student across 8 months of workshop, the pen had been used. It was as reliable as her arrival time. The pen went to the page, and the page became a dialogue, and the dialogue was always useful and occasionally brutal and always correct. She turned the last page at 8:01 p.m. I know this because I watched her, and I know her reading pace, and I was tracking. She set the manuscript down. The red pen rested beside it on the right-hand side of the stack. Not on top of the pages, not on a page. The pen lay on the desk beside the manuscript with the particular quality of an object that has been placed with intention and not as an afterthought. And it had not made a mark, and we were both in the room with that fact. She looked at me. I have been looked at by Riven for 8 months. I know the workshop look, clear, level, inventorying, the look that says I have found the thing in your pages, and I am going to tell you what it is with precise language, and you will not enjoy all of it, but you will be better for having heard it. I know that look with the specificity of someone who has been its subject consistently. This was not that look. This was a different register entirely, and my sternum registered it before I categorized it, before my mind had done anything at all with it. The warmth arriving in my chest, like a hand placed flat against a window, not inside, not yet, but the heat of it coming through. The desk lamp held the space between us in its specific gold. Everything beyond the desk was in low shadow. The building had been emptying since 5 o'clock and was now, at this hour, entirely still. Not silent, because old academic buildings are never silent, but still in the way that means no other human voice would interrupt whatever happened in this room. I did not move. She looked at me for 8 seconds. I know this because I counted. Then she said, "You knew what you were putting in this room when you wrote that last chapter." Her voice at this hour, in this specific register, not the workshop register, something lower and more direct, produced something in the back of my throat that I swallowed carefully before I answered. I answered, "Yes." One word. It had the weight of much more than one word, and we both received it that way, and neither of us acknowledged what we had received. She said, "So did I." The desk lamp, the manuscript, the red pen beside it, unmarked. I became aware, in the silence that followed, of the specific geography of the room. The desk between us, the 2 chairs angled toward each other. The bookshelves on 3 walls, pressing in with the particular density of 1,000 read and annotated books, the chair she occupied and the chair I occupied, and the distance between them, which was professional and exact, and suddenly very present in my awareness in a way that distance usually is not. She said nothing else. I said nothing else. The building settled around us, the specific creak of old wooden floors and old wooden bookshelves cooling in the evening air, and it was 8:03 p.m. on a Friday in the last week of semester, and I was aware of my hands in my lap and the temperature of them and the specific quality of the air in this room which had changed in some way I was not prepared to name. The red pen had not moved. I looked at it. I looked at the 34 pages beside it. I looked at the desk lamp's circle of gold, which held both of these objects and the edge of Riven's hand resting on the desk. Her right hand, the hand that held the pen, lying open and still on the desk surface in a way that had the particular quality of deliberate restraint. She was watching me look at these things. "The pen," she said. Not a question. I said, "You didn't use it." "No," she said. "I didn't." This was the note. The note she had just given me was the pen sitting beside the manuscript and not on it, and we were both reading it, and we were both reading it in the same way, and neither of us was going to say so in language that admitted what we were doing. I had spent 8 months receiving her notes. I had spent 8 months filing what they produced in me under rigorous critical attention, the kind I came here for, the kind that is improving the work. I had done this with the specific discipline of someone who knows what they are doing and why they are doing it and what would happen if they stopped. I had maintained this filing system through February's 12 pages of marginalia, through the March session, when she had kept my pages after workshop and returned them the following week with an additional handwritten page that said, in language that was professional and precise, that the novel was becoming something real, and I should not let the last chapter evade what it clearly needed to do. I had maintained it through every Thursday session in which she read my work with the specific quality of attention that felt. And I had filed this incorrectly. I understood this now. I had been filing it incorrectly for months, like being seen by someone who was not only reading the pages. The red pen was lying on the desk. It had not touched the manuscript. In 8 months of workshop, across 11 students and hundreds of pages, Riven's red pen had touched every submission. This was the fact. This was the instrument of the workshop, the physical evidence of the critical engagement, the mark on the page that said, I have been here. I have read this. Here is what I found. The pen was to Riven's reading as the cut was to my documentary work. The decisive act, the commitment to the shape of the thing. The pen had not moved. Something in my chest was doing something I was declining to name. She said, still in the not workshop register. When did you know the chapter was it? A question about the work. I recognized it as a question about the work and also as something else, and I answered the work question. When I finished the 3rd day, I read it back and something had landed. She said, the kitchen scene. Yes, you stayed in it, I said. You told me in March I had to. A pause, the desk lamp, the creak of the building. Something in the quality of her stillness had shifted. I registered this in the back of my neck, the specific alertness of a fine hair standing, before I registered it, consciously. She was still. She had been still for the duration of this conversation, but the quality of the stillness had changed. It had the quality now of something held deliberately, of someone maintaining a position with an effort that was not previously required. She said, the note in March. Yes. I wrote that note because the chapter needed it, she said. That's the true version. A pause and then, there's another version. I waited, she said. The other version is that I wrote it because I had been watching you stand at the edge of it for 6 months and I wanted to know what you would do when you finally went in. The building settled. The desk lamp hummed its faint, continuous note. I said, and? She looked at me. 8 seconds, the same as before. The same register, the look that was not the workshop look and had not been the workshop look since she put down the red pen. She said, you did not disappoint the chapter. This was a workshop thing to say. It was also not only a workshop thing to say, and we both received it that way. My hands in my lap, the warmth of them, the awareness of my own stillness, which was no longer the absence of movement, but the active maintenance of composure. Specific and effortful, the way stillness gets when the body has things it would do if it were not being asked to wait. The red pen on the desk. Unmarked. I had a thought that I examined with the directness I had been developing for 33 years. I had been in this room, in this specific quality of proximity, with this woman and this manuscript for 8 months in the aggregate and 90 minutes tonight, and the thing I had been filing incorrectly was the thing I had been writing about for 4 years. And it was now 34 pages on a desk between us, and the red pen had not moved, and something was going to happen or not happen in this room tonight, and I was going to sit here and receive whatever that was with the same quality of attention I had given everything that mattered in my life. I was going to be honest about the proximity. Riven said, the novel's 2 women. Yes, I said. The chapter works because neither of them says what they're doing. Yes. She picked up the manuscript with both hands and held it for a moment, not to read, not to annotate, simply to hold, and then set it down again in the same position. The red pen was still beside it. She looked at the pen and then at me. I've been holding this, she said, and touched the pen with 2 fingers. The lightest contact, index and middle, pressed briefly against the barrel and then lifted away. For 45 minutes, I haven't used it. She said it the way she said everything, directly, with precision, without softening. An observation offered, with no stated interpretation. I know, I said. I know you know, she said. You've been watching it. Yes. The desk lamp's circle of gold, the pen, the manuscript, the specific geography of the room. Desk between us, chairs angled toward each other, the low shadow beyond the lamp's reach pressing against the room's edges. The sound of nothing. No footsteps in the hall, no voices, the building's own deep quiet at 8:10 p.m. on a Friday. She said, "Tell me what you think it means." And here was the moment. The kind of moment I had been approaching for 8 months without knowing I was approaching it. The moment where the honest answer and the workshop answer diverge completely, where I am standing at the edge of the true thing and she is waiting to see what I will do. I had learned from her, across 8 months, that the only answer worth giving was the honest one. I had spent a semester writing toward that lesson. I said, "I think it means the pages didn't need it." A pause. "Is that the workshop answer or the other answer?" she said. "Both," I said, "and you know it." Her hand rested flat on the desk, the hand that had held the pen. The desk lamp's gold was warm across the back of it, illuminating the particular detail of her knuckles and the line of her fingers resting against the desk surface. And she was still, and I was still, and the room was still, and the building settled once with its deep, particular creak, and the desk lamp hummed. She said, "Yes." One word. The weight of it was the same as mine had been. She stood. The motion was deliberate, not sudden, not unexpected, simply the decision made and executed with the same precision she applied to everything. She came around the desk. This had not happened in 8 months of workshop. In 8 months of workshop, Riven had been on her side of the desk, the authority of the position maintained spatially as well as every other way. The desk between us as much a part of the session's grammar as the red pen and the returned pages. She came around the desk and stood beside my chair, 2 feet between us, and looked at the manuscript on the desk from this new angle. The air in the room was different from this position. I was aware of this with a specificity that had nothing to do with my conscious mind. Something in my spine went alert and stayed there. The back of my neck where the fine hairs were. The particular awareness of proximity that is not touch, but is not its absence either. She smelled like paper and cedar and something faint underneath. A botanical quality, clean and cool. And I became aware of this because at 2 feet, it was present in the room in a way it had not been from across the desk. And I filed this observation in no particular category because there was no appropriate category for it. She reached to the desk and turned the manuscript toward me. A small gesture, 2 fingers on the bottom edge, a rotation of perhaps 30 degrees, so that the pages faced me rather than facing across the desk to where she had been sitting. She did not move back. She stood beside my chair, 2 feet between us, looking at the manuscript she had just turned toward me, and I understood the gesture. "Look at what you made. Look at the thing itself." She was directing my attention back to the page, away from her, and she was doing this while standing beside my chair 2 feet away in a position she had chosen and had not reversed. I looked at the manuscript. The first page visible, the opening of the final chapter, the kitchen scene, the 2 women, the afternoon light, the thing I had finally been willing to write down. I said, "You're not going to write a note." She said, "No, not even at the end." Not even at the end. I looked at the first page of the manuscript. The opening sentence, which I could read from this angle. She stayed at the table after the other one left because the kitchen still held the specific warmth of the conversation and she was not ready to leave it. I had written that sentence on the first of the 4 days, and it had been the sentence that told me this was the thing itself. Because I had not planned it. Because it had arrived. Because it was exactly true. Riven was looking at the same sentence. I could feel the direction of her attention, not feel it, register it with the particular awareness of someone who has been in the same room as this woman for 8 months and has learned, incorrectly filed, what it feels like when her attention lands on a specific object. She said, very quietly, the volume she used at the end of workshop sessions, the close reading register, the voice that was not for the room but for the page. She stayed at the table. I said, "Yes." Because the kitchen still held the warmth. Yes. She wasn't ready to leave it. The specific quality of her voice at this distance, 2 feet, was something I had not had at close range before. In workshop, she spoke across the length of the seminar table. In office hours, she was across the desk. At 2 feet, at this hour, at this volume, her voice had a quality that produced something in the back of my throat, a warmth, a specific weight in the soft tissue that I swallowed carefully and filed in no category. She said, "You weren't writing about the character." I said nothing. She said, "Nia." It was the first time in 8 months that she had used my name in the specific register she was using now. Not the workshop register, not the administrative register, not the clear-level sound of my name in a sentence that was about the work. But this register, which was quiet and direct and had the quality of something said once, carefully, after a long time of not saying it. Something in my chest moved, not my heart, something lower and more central, the specific warm shift of a thing rearranging itself that had been in one position for 8 months. I said, "The chapter works because I was honest about the proximity." She was still. The specific quality of her stillness now was different from any stillness I had witnessed in 8 months. Not the workshop stillness, the composed and level stillness of someone receiving student work and processing it, but something that cost more, something held tighter, something in which I could see, at 2 feet in the lamp's gold, the specific quality of effort. She said, "Yes, it does." She turned her head and looked at me. Not at the manuscript. At me. The desk lamp's light reached us both here, differently than it reached us across the desk. Warmer, lower, the specific intimacy of a single light source in a dark room, the way it makes the illuminated things look like the only things. She was looking at me with the look that was not the workshop look, the look that had no name in my filing system, the look I had been receiving for approximately 45 minutes and had been declining to interpret with the full accuracy available to me. I said, "What's the note you're not writing?" She was still for 3 seconds. 4. The building settled, the lamp hummed. At 2 feet, I could hear her breathing, the specific quality of a breath held and released with care, the careful management of a chest that was doing something she was deciding whether to allow. She said, "The note I'm not writing is the one that matters." And then she turned to face me. Not the desk, not the manuscript, me. And she put her hand flat on the manuscript on the desk. Not a gesture of authority, not the workshop gesture, the hand that held the red pen and the hand that returned the pages, and the hand that was always at a specific distance and in a specific relationship to the work. This was a grounding gesture. This was a hand placed on a surface to hold, because something else, some competing gravity, was making holding necessary. She said, "Tell me you knew what you were handing me." Her hand flat on the manuscript. 34 pages under her palm. The red pen beside it, unmarked on the desk surface, lying precisely where she had set it and had not touched it since. The instrument of her profession, the mark maker, lying unused beside the pages that had not needed it, in the specific quality of an object whose absence of use has become its most significant statement. I looked at her hand on the manuscript. I looked at the red pen. I looked at her face in the lamp's gold, dark eyes, the particular quality of attention in them that was directed not at the pages but at me, not at the work but at the writer, not at what I had made but at what I was, which was a thing she had been reading for 8 months with an accuracy I had been pretending very carefully not to know about. I said, "I knew." She didn't move. Her hand stayed flat on the manuscript. The red pen lay beside it, not moving, not marking, its entire meaning now in the fact of its stillness. "How long?" she said. The only honest answer was the complete answer. I had been taught this by her across 8 months of workshop. The only answer worth giving is the one that goes all the way in. "Since February," I said, "the notes you gave me on the apartment scene." Her hand on the manuscript shifted, a micro movement, the heel of her palm pressing once, barely perceptibly, into the stack of pages, not a gesture outward. A gesture inward, the specific movement of someone applying pressure to a surface to redistribute the weight they're holding. She said, "February. Yes. The 12 pages of marginalia. Yes," she said, very quietly. "I wrote those notes over 2 evenings. I received this. I let it sit in the room between us in the lamp's gold, in the space between her hand on the manuscript and the red pen lying beside it. In the 2-foot distance she had chosen and not reversed. I let it sit with the full weight of what it was, which was the other version, the one she had named earlier, the one in which she had been watching me stand at the edge of something for 6 months and had wanted to know what I would do when I finally went in. She had written 12 pages of marginalia across 2 evenings. She had not written it in one sitting. She had returned to it. I said, "I read them over 2 hours." Her breath came in, audible, barely, at this distance. a small, involuntary intake at a moment when she had been managing her breathing with precision. Something in her composure shifted. Not broke, because Riven did not break, but shifted the way a held position shifts when the muscular effort of holding it reaches a particular threshold. And her hand on the manuscript pressed once more into the pages, and she was looking at me with the full, unmediated attention she had been giving the manuscript for 45 minutes, and I was receiving it with the same quality of attention I had given everything in my life that had mattered most. She said, "You wrote the kitchen scene." "Yes." "The part where the one who has been silent is still at the table." "Yes." "She's at the table because—" She stopped, the sentence unfinished. She looked at the manuscript under her hand and then at me, and the look was the look, the one I had been receiving since 8:01 p.m., the one I had been filing in no category, and she said, "Say it." I said, "She's at the table because the other one is still in the room." 3 seconds of stillness. The building, the lamp, the red pen on the desk between us, unmarked, the accumulated weight of 8 months of use and 1 night of non-use. Its whole statement now in the fact of what it had not done, the pages it had not touched, the manuscript it had received and returned without a single mark. Riven's hand lifted from the manuscript. She turned toward me fully, away from the desk, away from the pages, toward me, and the 2 feet between us became present in the room as a physical object, as a measurable thing, as the specific distance between one person and another person who have been in the same room for 8 months with one kind of attention and have spent this particular hour moving very slowly through the successive stages of a different kind. She said, "You have been in my workshop for 8 months." "Yes." "There are appropriate—" She stopped, the professional vocabulary arriving and stopping before it completed itself. A sentence begun and not finished, which was unlike her, which was, I received this with careful attention, a specific and legible crack in the composure of a woman who did not leave sentences unfinished. She said, "The chapter is the best work submitted in this workshop in 11 years. I said, "Thank you." She said, "That's the workshop statement." "I know," I said. She was looking at me, 2 feet, the lamp's gold between us, the particular warmth of a single directional light source making the distance visible as a physical space. Not a barrier, something more specific than a barrier, something with the quality of a held breath. "Tell me something that isn't the workshop statement," she said. I thought about what I had learned in this room and in the seminar room across 8 months from the woman standing 2 feet from my chair in the dark at 8:20 p.m. on a Friday. I thought about standing at the edge and going in. I thought about honesty as craft and honesty as something else, as the same motion applied to different material. I thought about the red pen on the desk, unmarked, the whole year's instrument lying still. I said, "I wrote the kitchen scene about being in your workshop. The room received this, the building settled, the lamp hummed, she was still. Then very slowly, the deliberateness of a decision being executed with full awareness of what it was. She moved. Not toward the door, not toward the chair. She moved the 1 foot that remained between us into the space that had been between us, and she was close, the botanical cedar of her close and present. And she reached out, her right hand, the hand that held the pen, the hand whose red ink marks had been across my pages for 8 months. And she placed it against my cheek, the back of her hand, the knuckle side, colder than I expected, the specific cool of a hand that had been resting on a desk surface for 20 minutes in an office that had cooled toward evening, and then warming almost immediately where it met my skin, the temperature differential collapsing in the space of 2 seconds. 3. She did not move it. She held it there, the back of her hand against my cheek, the ridge of her knuckles against the line of my cheekbone, and I was still, the specific quality of stillness that was no longer management but attention, every part of me simply attending to the fact of her hand against my face, the temperature of it, the weight of it, which was less than I expected, and more than I had been carrying all year, the way the warmth built between my skin and hers in the dark at 8:21 p.m. in the empty building. She was looking at me, not at the manuscript, not at the work, at me. She said nothing. I said nothing. The red pen on the desk, the manuscript beside it, the desk lamp's gold falling across both of these objects and across her hand against my face and across the space between us, which was no longer 2 feet, which was the space of a breath, which was the space of a hand, I turned my face, very slightly, into the back of her hand. Not toward her, into the back of her hand, the way you turn toward warmth without deciding to. The way the body moves toward a thing it has been waiting for before the mind has finished its accounting. The ridge of her knuckles against my cheekbone, the specific warmth of it. The botanical cedar, close. The sound of her breathing, which had changed. No longer the careful, managed breath of earlier, but something with less management in it. Something that arrived and was released without the particular deliberateness of before. She said, "Nia, same register as before." The quiet, direct, once-said quality. "Yes," I said. She said. "The semester has ended," I said. "Yes." "The chapter is complete." "Yes," she said. "I'm going to say one more thing in the workshop register, and then I'm not." I waited. She said, "It's the best chapter you've written. The work is real." Whatever happens after this semester, the chapter is real and will remain real, independent of everything else in this room. She said it clearly, directly, with the level precision of someone making a record. Making certain I understood that these two things, the work and the room, were being held separately, by her, deliberately, and that the separation was a form of care. I said, "I understand." "Good," she said. "That's the workshop register." She turned her hand, in the back of her hand against my cheek, turning slowly until it was her palm. The flat of her palm against my cheek, warm now, the temperature differential long resolved, her palm against my face, with a pressure that was slight and entirely intentional, the specific pressure of a choice made and held. She said, "This is the other register." Her palm against my face, warm, steady, the specific quality of a hand that has decided to be where it is and is not performing uncertainty. I stood, not away, toward. The motion my body had been waiting to make for 8 months, rising from the chair with the specific, unhurried quality of something that had been decided at a level below decision. And I was standing, and the space between us was the space of a breath. And her palm moved from my cheek to the angle of my jaw, 2 fingers at my jaw, the lightest direction, tilting my face up toward hers in the specific gesture of someone who has finally allowed what they have been managing not to allow. And her other hand came to rest against my sternum, palm flat, fingers spread, the way you put a hand on something you want to feel the truth of. And I felt it, her palm against my sternum, the warmth of it, the specific weight of it, what it would cost her to feel my heartbeat through the burgundy blouse and to acknowledge what she was feeling. She said very quietly, at the distance of a breath, "You wrote the true thing." "Yes," I said. "So did I," she said. "This is mine." And I understood what she was doing. Not losing control, because Riven did not lose control, but choosing to release the restraint she had been holding with both hands for 8 months, choosing it with the full awareness of someone who knows what they are doing and does it anyway, choosing it the way the novel's character chose to stay at the table, the way the honest thing is always a choice and never an accident and never less than what it costs. Her hand at my jaw, her palm at my sternum, the red pen on the desk, unmarked, the manuscript in the lamp's gold, the botanical cedar of her, close and warm. The specific quality of her face at this distance, dark eyes, the line of her jaw, the few dark strands loose at her temples after a long Friday, and the way she was looking at me, which was the way I had been looked at once in the cold open of this night and would carry with me for longer than this night. The look that said, "I have read the true thing. I have read it clearly, and I am not going to look away from it." She closed the distance. The quality of it was exactly what I would have written if I had been writing it. Unhurried, deliberate, with the specific precision of a woman who does everything with precision, and the warmth of it, the cedar warmth of her close, the specific warmth of a mouth that had been saying true things for 8 months, finally saying this one, the truest one, the one that had no workshop register and needed none. I put my hand over hers, the one at my sternum, and felt it. My own heartbeat, her palm, the warmth conducting between us. She did not move her hand. She let me hold it there, over my own heart, and the specific quality of that, the 2 hands over the heartbeat, hers under mine, was the thing I would not be able to write about for a long time yet and would not try to. She was still choosing, even here, even now, not swept, not lost, choosing, with both eyes open, to be where she was, to have her hand where it was, to be at this distance at 8:24 p.m. in the empty building, with the manuscript on the desk and the red pen beside it and whatever this was, whatever this night was becoming, its edges still warm and still unclear. We stayed there for a moment. The word is inadequate, the concept is inadequate, the measurement of time is inadequate for what a moment does when it is made of 8 months. And the building settled around us, and the lamp held its gold, and the city, 3 floors below, continued with the faint, indifferent persistence of cities continuing. She drew back eventually. Not away, drew back just far enough to look at me, the same full, unmediated look, her hand still at my jaw, the angle she had made and had not unmade. She said nothing. I said nothing. We stood in the lamp's gold, with the manuscript on the desk between us and the red pen beside the manuscript and the silence of an empty building at the end of a semester around us. And it was 8:25 p.m., and nothing was finished and nothing was required to be finished, and the room held us in its specific warmth, in its bookshelves and its one light source, and its deep, accumulated quiet, as though it had been waiting all semester for us to stop having 2 different conversations. She moved first. She went back to her side of the desk, around it, deliberately, the reverse of the path she had taken, and she sat in her chair, and she looked at the manuscript, and she looked at the red pen. She picked the pen up, held it in her right hand, the same grip, the same rolling motion between 2 fingers, the instrument of the workshop, the mark maker. She held it over the manuscript. She set it down. Beside the pages, not on them, the same position. She looked at me. I said, "Office hours resume in September." She said, "They do." I said, "The novel will need a second reader eventually." She said, "It will." Neither of us said what we both knew, that the semester was over and the department had its structure, and September was not tomorrow, and the manuscript on the desk was not the only thing between us that was unfinished and would require more careful, deliberate attention than we had given it tonight. More drafts, more revision, more sitting with the thing until the right words came. I picked up my bag from the floor beside my chair. I straightened my burgundy blouse, which had not been disarranged, which was simply a thing I did with my hands because I needed something to do with my hands. I looked at the manuscript on the desk. I said, "May I take it?" She said, "Leave it." I looked at her. She said, "I want to read it again." I held this, the weight of it, the specific quality of a woman who has just read 34 pages without lifting a red pen, who has said everything she said and done everything she did, asking to read it again, not to annotate, not to note, simply to read it again in this room after I had gone, to sit with the thing I had made, and to be in its company in the quiet of the empty building. I said, "All right." I picked up my bag. I walked toward the door, past the bookshelves, past the low shadow at the room's edges, into the hallway's cooler dark. At the door I turned. She was at her desk, the manuscript in the lamp's gold, the red pen beside it in the same position, unmarked. She was not looking at me. She was looking at the manuscript, her right hand resting on the desk surface beside the pen, the open hand, the hand that had been at my cheek and jaw and sternum and was now lying flat and still on the desk in the lamp's warmth. I said, "Good night, Riven." She said, "Good night." I left. The hallway was dark and cool and held the specific quiet of an emptied building, and my footsteps were audible in it. And I walked through the quiet toward the elevator and then through the lobby and out through the literature building's heavy front doors into the April night, which was cool and smelled like cut grass and rain. And I stood on the steps for a moment with the particular quality of someone who has just been in a room where something happened that will take some time to fully read. The manuscript was on Riven's desk. The red pen was beside it. She was going to read it again. In the morning. Not tonight, not yet. But eventually in the weeks between now and September, I was going to sit down and write the next thing. I didn't know what it would be. I knew it would go all the way in. I knew this the way I knew things that my body had understood before my mind caught up. The way I had known the kitchen scene was the true thing on the 3rd day before I had finished reading it back. I walked across the empty campus in the April dark, and behind me, 3 floors up in the literature building, in an office made of bookshelves and one lamp's warmth, Riven was sitting with 34 pages and a red pen she had decided, for the first time in 11 years of workshop, not to use. The pen would stay unused. She would not explain this to the department. She would not need to. The manuscript would go in the file with the semester's materials, unmarked, and anyone who looked at it would see the pages and the absence of red ink and would draw their own conclusions, which would be incorrect because the correct conclusion was not available to anyone who had not been in that room at 8 p.m. on a Friday in the last week of semester, who had not watched the pen sit beside the pages for 45 minutes, who had not understood that the note not written was the note that mattered, that the red pen lying still beside 34 pages was its own full statement, complete and unambiguous to the two people who knew how to read it. I crossed the campus, the April night, the grass, the rain smell, the particular emptiness of a university at the end of a semester when the work is done, and what remains is whatever comes next. Behind me, the light in Riven's office window was still on,